Prayers. And our prayer this morning will be presented by Deacon Charlie Francis of the Roman Catholic Church.
We pray in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, through whom all monarchs reign, through whom all are bound by justice, through whom only good counsel, knowledge, and understanding come, be with your people gathered here this morning. Bless the members of this assembly with your truth, wisdom, and understanding, and guide each one, even as we witness and they deliberate issues concerning your nation and its well-being. Father, we lift up and place our speaker in your hands, asking that you guide him. Give him your graces even as he facilitates and leads the House through this session. We pray that everything spoken and done here under his direction will be grace-filled and in accordance with your will. We pray still that you will have your way even here, that the chosen ones gathered herein will be true to mission, putting aside personal interests and unwarranted remits, and that the results of the assembly in session will be worthy of your grace and the glory and honor of your holy name, as to safety, justice, and the public will, peace, and happiness. With an eye on tranquility in your Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the knitting and warmth of neighborliness in our hearts, and filled with true Christian values and love, we make these opening prayers through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much, Deacon Francis. You may be seated.
Confirmation of minutes.
The minutes will be deferred.
Messages from the Governor General. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members and our viewing and listening audiences, welcome to this sitting of the National Assembly. I just have one announcement this morning, and it is to congratulate the members of the Youth Parliamentary Association on the celebration of their 20th anniversary. It was my pleasure to be present here, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, where there was a mock parliamentary debate by members of that organization. And so I take this opportunity to congratulate them on the celebration of their 20th anniversary. Thank you.
Presentation of papers and reports from committees.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table copies of the 13th Actuarial Review of the Social Security Fund as of December 31st, 2020. Mr. Speaker, in doing so, I want to point out at least just 3 things that are highlighted by the actuary in its report, and that the country should take note of. First of all, Mr. Speaker, the net total assets of Social Security has grown from $1.522 billion in 2017, when the last actuarial report was done, to $1.672 billion in 2020, 31st day of December, when this 13th actuarial report was completed. Put another way, Mr. Speaker, the net total assets of Social Security has increased by $150 million in the 3 years under review. The second point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is during the same period, 2018 January to 31st December 2020, employment in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis peaked at 29,000 for the first time. It hovered around 25,000, at just about 25,000 plus at the last actuarial report, and during the period it peaked at 29,000. I do not want to confuse persons, but I will say because of COVID we are below that figure now, but we certainly will get beyond the 29,000 in the next few years. The third point I want to make is that during the 3-year period, the fund has gained 2 years in terms of its projection to be sustained and sustain the mandate that it has been set up to do. In 2017, the 12th actuarial report indicated that if nothing changed, the fund is projected pessimistically to be depleted in 2036 and optimistically 2041. This report has now put that optimistic date to 2043, which means the fund has gained 2 years. And with that said, perhaps I should make another point, although I had not contemplated making it. It is important for us to recognize that changes will come. They have been recommended at the last actuarial review, and they will come. We will be discussing that at all levels, including in the public square, because there have been recommendations, for example, of the retirement date being moved from 62 to 65. We have to discuss that in the public square. There is the recommendation that rather than reaching the highest level, 60% of your wages within 35 years, that it goes from 35 to 40 years. Those are things which we will discuss at Cabinet, here in Parliament, of course, and in the public square. So those are important recommendations, and I want to underscore why it is important to have those discussions, because I want persons who are benefiting from Social Security, getting what they call their retirement benefit, to realize that by the time you are between your 6th and 7th year into pension, you have used up all of your contributions. So in other words, once you live beyond 60, 67, 68, you're really getting a benefit from those youngsters who are contributing. So the youngsters must understand that rather than sit around the corner online, they have to work so that they can contribute for the pension fund of those persons who have worked hard in the country, or older persons. It is important to mention that because we all know that productivity is important, and the sustainability of Social Security is dependent upon that productivity to be able to give back to those who have contributed all their lives and retired, whether it is at 62 or at 65. So I want to encourage all the young people to appreciate that when you get a pep job even from the government, sitting around the corner and liming is not helping the situation. You have to put in the full day's work so that our institutions, which eventually looks after us when we retire, they are able to do so because we have contributed religiously into those organizations. The Social Security Board, the Social Security system, therefore, Mr. Speaker, I should say, is strong, is robust. And while I say that it is strong and robust, we as a cabinet and as a parliament and as a people, we have a responsibility to ensure that it remains strong and grow, that its life is lengthened to be able to deliver the benefits to those who are deserving of benefits. With those said, Mr. Speaker, I now lay 2 copies of the St. Christopher and Nevis Social Security Board 13th Actual Review of the Social Security Fund as of December 31st, 2020 on the table of this House.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Hamilton, Minister responsible for Social Security. Before we move to the next item, it was remiss of me to announce that I did receive an apology for the absence of the Honourable Mark Brantley, member for Nevis 9, and the Honourable Lindsay Grant, member for St. Christopher 4. Their absence is related to recent travel duties. Thank you.
Petitions, government notices, unofficial notices, questions, request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers,
I recognize the Honourable Akilabayo Nisbet, member for St. Christopher 3, and with a statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to everyone viewing and listening. This morning I rise to provide an update from the Ministry of Health relative to our COVID-19 response. Over the past couple of weeks, maybe the last 2 weeks, we have all been made aware of the fact that our laboratories have been stretched. That meant that our turnaround time for results have been affected significantly. I wish to take this opportunity to apologize to the general public for the delay in results. And I want to assure you that the ministry is in the process of having these backlogs cleared expeditiously. We have sought regional assistance with the clearing of this backlog and are hoping to have this cleared over the next few days. I am also happy to report that our JNF laboratory have been given the revalidation and will now be processing samples relative to COVID-19. This revalidation of the JNF will add an additional capacity of between 120 to 140 samples being processed per day. As you would have been made aware at the recent PM conference, the CMO would have indicated that our lab capacity, as it is right now, we have the next generation lab, which is able to process between 150 to 300 samples. The Avalon lab, which is able to process 20 to 40 samples per day. And the QDL lab, which is able to process 8 to 12 samples per day. However, we've been informed by QDL that their capacity will also be increasing shortly. This therefore suggests that our current capacity at the Joseph and with our current capacity at the Joseph in France back online, and with the addition of the other labs that are currently processing COVID-19 samples, it means that in St. Kitts and Nevis, we currently have a capacity to be able to run 298 to about 492 samples per day. I would also like to bring to the attention of the general public and this honorable house that on Nevis, the Alexandria Hospital is working on getting a PCR machine online as well. And once that is online, we will certainly see even more increase in the capacity for running our COVID-19 tests, and it will also allow for Nevis to be able to take care of their own samples. I would like to take this opportunity to be able to thank our lab partners, the private labs, who have been providing us with the services which have allowed us to be able to have the capacity that we have over the past 20 months, so that we did not have to be sending our samples overseas. However, now that we are in a situation where our number of samples outweighs the capacity that we can accommodate here, we're seeking assistance from the external parties in order for us to be able to run the samples and be able to get results to persons in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, in our fight against COVID-19, we have implemented a broad four-pronged public health approach to combating COVID-19 pandemic. We believe, however, that our continued monitoring and evaluation of our response is vital in order for us to be able to provide critical data and information that would guide our strategic planning and develop appropriate interventions to allocate and reallocate our resources in better ways. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to outline these interventions, which include: 1, our contact tracing, which is guided by our protocols; our isolation, quarantine, and management of cases; our COVID-19 testing, which I've already addressed; and our COVID-19 vaccination. Mr. Speaker, I will outline our protocols that we will be implementing going forward, given the observations that have been made and the path in which we believe will best be able to help us to move forward more efficiently. First, allow me to just explain to the general public what we mean by when we say that you are a contact or you have been identified through the contact tracing exercise. So in order for us to determine the contacts, a proper contact tracing history will be ascertained by our contact tracers, and the following definitions will now guide the contact tracing exercise. This definition, we will consider a contact to be a person who had any one of the following exposures to a positive case during the 2 days before and the 14 days after the onset of symptoms of a confirmed case. 1, face-to-face or any direct physical contact with a confirmed case within 1 meter and for at least 15 minutes. 2, if you have direct care for a patient with confirmed COVID-19 disease without the use of the recommended personal protective equipment. And so with those 2 particular definitions, this is how we will determine whether or not individuals are contacts or would be part of our contact tracing exercise. However, we do understand that there can be situations that can be indicated through our local risk assessments, and certain situations may arise, or our contact tracers may deem someone to be a contract based on the questioning that may be presented to them when conducting the contact tracing exercise. Mr. Speaker, I will now look more at and give the public information regarding our contact tracing protocols in particular. I'll first look at contact tracing protocols for our fully vaccinated contacts. After we have done the relevant review of this protocol and given our current state, the Ministry will now implement the new recommendation as follows for fully vaccinated contacts. A fully vaccinated contact will receive one RT-PCR test, which will be done 7 days post last contact with the positive case, and no tracing of that individual's contact. They will also be allowed to continue work or usual activity. So if you are fully vaccinated, you will receive one RT-PCR test, which will be done 7 days after your last contact with the positive case. However, if you are fully vaccinated and you are living with a positive case, you will test on day 7, and then you would also be tested again when the case is fully recovered. So if you are living with a positive case, you will have 2 tests, one at day 7 and one at when the case has fully recovered. In terms of our unvaccinated or partially vaccinated contacts, our new recommendation for unvaccinated or partially vaccinated contacts is that these individuals will be quarantined for 14 days. Then you will be tested on day 14 and, if negative, released. That means for our unvaccinated or partially unvaccinated individuals, you would also be doing 1 test at the end of your quarantine period, which will be 14 days post-contact with the positive case. I will now move to our isolation, quarantine, and management of cases. As we are aware, the number of active cases continues to increase. This also means that the cadre of case managers will also be increased. We currently have 7 case managers on St. Kitts. That number will be increased to 10 on St. Kitts. On Nevis, there are currently 3 case managers. However, at this time, we do believe that the 3 on Nevis can remain for now. Each case will be contacted by their case manager. However, each case is advised to maintain constant contact with the assigned case manager to help prevent deterioration in medical conditions. So if you start to feel worse while you are in quarantine, we are asking you reach out to your case manager, who will be able to assist you with a medical response to help you, to prevent you from getting to a point of being severe. Number 3, our case managers, contact tracers, and testers will all be sharing the same information to the general public. So it doesn't matter who you speak with, they will all be providing you with the same information. Because we have been getting reports that persons are receiving mixed information. We're going to ensure from the ministry end that all of our case managers, our contact tracers, testers, even our clerks and nurses, all provide the same information to the general public. One of the recommendations that we would also be putting forward is for us to be able to engage with our hotels and encourage them to utilize the hotel doctors and nurses to help with taking of the swabs from the guests each morning and transporting those samples to the relevant laboratory in a timely manner. This will decrease the burden on our public health system to be able to do this. I will now turn to our COVID-19 vaccination. The Ministry of Health aims to remove all barriers to the access to vaccination. There is now no appointment needed for vaccination with the Pfizer vaccine. Again, there will be no need to make an appointment for vaccination with the Pfizer vaccines. Persons can simply walk into our various clinics during the scheduled hours for vaccination and be vaccinated. I also want to bring to the attention of everyone that our health centers will be open every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and on Sundays, Bastille, Tabernacle and Old Road will be open from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and all other centers will be open from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. I also want to bring to your attention that we are working closely with the Ministry of Education to determine a schedule for our high schools regarding when each class will be accommodated for vaccination. 2 PAHO advisors are currently on the ground and are conducting training sessions this week with our public health team. They also made presentations yesterday at our New York briefing on 1, the vaccine hesitancy, and 2, the safety of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in children. I must also note that in conversation with them, they are very much pleased with our vaccination rollout thus far, and they would have indicated to me that the expectation was that countries would reach to about 40% of the population vaccinated by December, which is a recommendation from WHO. However, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have already reached that mark. And they actually want to be able to use us as an example as to how you are able to successfully vaccinate your population. So I just thought I would bring that to the attention. That doesn't mean that we are in the all clear as it relates to our vaccination. As you have heard, we are trying to reach an 80% mark here in the Federation. So we've set our own goal at 80%, and we are hopeful that we can reach that with everyone taking part and doing their part. I wanted to make mention of the fact that the Federation would have received an additional 1,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And we are expecting some further supplies of AstraZeneca shortly. This then facilitates us in offering 2 vaccine choices at our clinics, the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccines. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 pandemic has turned our world upside down. We need all hands on deck. We need persons to comply with the protocols. We need persons to take the vaccine. Both the non-pharmaceutical measures and the vaccines in combination saves lives, and the evidence is irrefutable. Remember, the decisions we all make can be the difference between life and death. And while the Ministry of Health have invested over $18 million thus far in the fight against the virus, the government alone cannot fight. We cannot fight with resources alone. There must be a keen sense of individual and community responsibility. As more people are protected from COVID-19 through vaccination, our goals of achieving maximal closeness again, reducing travel restrictions, masking and distancing stipulations will undoubtedly be closer to attainment. Clearly, not only have vaccines protected us for decades, but it has proven that vaccines will continue to help us with our usual traditional way of life and safeguard us from deadly and debilitating vaccine-preventable diseases. I am very pleased at this point in particular to reaffirm the Ministry's position relative to the continued rollout of our response plan, and we endeavor to turn the tide on this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health is immensely appreciative of the invaluable role of its frontline and essential workers, its partners, caregivers, private and public sector, and every person, family, and community working collaboratively to ensure that no one get left behind. And so we urge everyone, continue to follow the non-pharmaceutical measures, and if you can, be vaccinated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 3, Akilabayo Nisbet. Minister, Honourable Jeffers, I'm just curious, when you made your entry and you walked through the opposition, were you invited to?
No, actually, just said what I thought nothing.
I know something happened, but I wasn't sure. But that's off the record, though. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 2, John L. Powell.
A pleasant good morning, Mr. Speaker, honourable members. I rise to make two brief statements in relation to the two ministries with which I have responsibility for. Firstly, wear my cap as the Minister with responsibility for Youth, Sport and Culture. Mr. Speaker, I wish to give a brief report on the recently concluded CPL Games, which would have been hosted in its entirety here in St. Kitts and ended on the 15th of September. Mr. Speaker, within the first 2 weeks of hosting of that cohort, in excess of 500 locals would have directly been employed and been remunerated in excess of $2 million EC dollars, well surpassing the investment made by this government. Mr. Speaker, the CPL Games were viewed by over 500 million viewers across the globe. That in itself is of tremendous value to St. Kitts and Nevis, showcasing not just us as a sporting destination, but us as a major tourism destination. Mr. Speaker, needless to say that those games brought tremendous financial and other benefits to the people of this country at a very difficult time as we battle this pandemic. An official audit is being done of the games, and a more detailed report will be brought, and I will report on the tremendous benefits that our people would have gained at a later date when that report is made available. I think it is important to also note, Mr. Speaker, that just this week, the Medical Chief of Staff of the JNF Hospital, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, would have indicated that there is no link between the hosting of CPL and the current COVID-19 cases here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I think this is an important fact, and it shows that St. Kitts and Nevis is able to host major events and large gatherings in a safe way, as we did with CPL, allowing only vaccinated persons, patrons and workers to attend. This is testament of this government's ability to forge forward in the face of a global pandemic to the benefit of our people. As I end, I must indicate that our very own St. Kitts Nevis Patriots would have been successful, and I believe that success, particularly during the week of National Heroes Day and Independence, certainly brought about a certain renewed sense of patriotism and would have brought a bit of joy to people suffering from COVID fatigue at a difficult time. And so I officially use this platform to give commendations to the local organizing committee, groundsmen, all persons who had any part to play in the successful hosting of those games. Mr. Speaker, I now switch my cap to that of the Minister of Education, and I provide an update on the status of our education sector here in St. Kitts and Nevis at this point. The education system in the Federation continues to function in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is obvious that as a result of the constraints brought on by the COVID-19, that our system cannot operate at optimum capacity. Our main thrust is to keep our schools open for the delivery of face-to-face instruction in a safe environment. To ensure that this happens, the Ministry of Education has prepared a set of guidelines for the opening and functioning of early childhood centers, primary and secondary schools, AVEC, and the NSTP. This document, to which I refer, is available to the public on the Ministry of Education's website, education.edu.kn. And Mr. Speaker, I must indicate that this is not the first time that we have done this. This is a document which would originally have been prepared in preparation for the last academic year, 2020 to 2021, and would have been made public would have been updated and made public prior to the start of this academic year, 2021-2022, to all stakeholders, parents, teachers, the general public. Situation report for early childhood development centers. The early childhood development centers have not been spared the fury of the COVID-19 pandemic. With a spike in COVID-19 cases across the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the early childhood sector continues to experience a number of challenges, which appear to be slowly and steadily reducing. Beginning in late August, a number of staff members and children tested positive for the novel coronavirus. This led to the closure of a number of early childhood centers. However, with a number of recoveries of COVID-positive cases and full sanitization of affected facilities, centers have reopened to offer their services. Currently, all centers are in operation, although some sections or classes are affected by partial closure because of a positive COVID test for a staff member or child. In every center, there is the challenging issue of a reduced workforce to meet the daily tasks. A concerning number of early childhood employees are at home for an unanticipated long period of time. As they await results of their COVID-19 tests or that of their children, this problem has a ripple effect of overburdening and overwhelming those who are available to work, as the age and developmental stage of the children demand constant attention and supervision by the reduced staff. For a number of these employees, the present environment is filled with an abnormally high amount of work. In addressing the issue of significant numbers of staff members on leave, there appears to be some confusion related to the contact tracing protocol. Clarity and guidance have been required to outline clearly who qualifies to remain at home whenever a worker comes in contact with positive COVID-19 cases or contacts of such a case. That, as you'd have heard from my colleague Minister of Health just now, has been resolved. It must be noted that the pandemic not only affects centers, but it also resulted in a period of closure for the Office of the Early Childhood Development Unit. However, the ECDU's staff continue to function remotely as they fulfill their role in the administration of the sector. The Office of the ECDU will be reopened shortly. Overall, the early childhood sector continues to function in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Commendations are in order for all the workers at any level in the sector who go above and beyond their call of duty in taking up the slack for those who are on leave. Situation report for primary and secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, 9 of our primary and 6 secondary schools, private and public, have been severely impacted by positive cases of the COVID-19. To date, among the student population, we've had 34 positive cases of COVID-19 in schools. There were 18 at the primary level and 16 at the secondary level. These cases have had the ripple effect of several classes being disrupted and a number of students and teachers having to be tested. The results of some of these tests are still pending. Other students are scheduled to be tested tomorrow, October 1st, and Saturday, October 2nd. This information is very well documented and monitored by the Office of the Chief Education Officer. Positive cases of COVID in our schools will not lead to closure of schools at this time, however. Instead, schools will implement one of 4 emergency level operations. For example, level 0, where school is open for face-to-face instruction and all students can attend school. Level 1, school is open but on a shift system where students attend school at designated times. Level 1 comes about as a result of loss of learning spaces due to acts of nature or construction, or to accommodate for physical distancing due to increased school population. Level 2, where school is open but testing and contact tracing is ordered by the Ministry of Health. Level 2 comes about where a student or staff member has flu-like symptoms or has been exposed to a positive COVID-19 case, where a student or staff member whose immediate family or a relative who have had significant close contact is in quarantine, and where a student or staff member who has tested positive for COVID-19. Level 3, where school is closed by the Ministry of Education. Level 3 comes about to a serious health issue, for example, mold or COVID-19. Where serious physical plant issues exist, for example, loss of electricity, flood, fire due to fire, or water, no water. And where the Federation is on a total lockdown, or schools are affected due to curfew. Mr. Speaker, in an attempt to make this information more readily available, the Ministry of Education is undertaking to publish a number of simplified flyers and publications to keep the general public up to date. The main goal of the Ministry of Education at this time is to reduce the amount of learning loss amongst our students. 4 schools are opening on a shift system: the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive, the Bastia High School, and the Washington Archibald High School. The Charles E. Mills Secondary School is also operating an alternative shift system. In terms of secondary schools, whatever the arrangement, plans are in place for 5th formers to be in school every day, all day. My ministry is advocating for 100% inoculation amongst high school in order to keep our school community safe. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine appointments and PTA meetings. The Ministry of Education, in response to the request from the Ministry of Health, outlined and implemented a plan to facilitate the sensitization of parents and to ease with which appointments were made. 1, principals were asked to share the following information with parents of children who are 12 years and older. A, the school's appointment day and date. B, vaccinations will be administered from 1 p.m. at the assigned health center. They will be done in batches of 5 so as to limit wastage. C, appointments for students must be scheduled using the issued form of the school, so that the school can create an e-form which captures the given information. D, all forms must be submitted 3 days prior to the appointment date. And E, parents and guardians must be present with their child or ward at the time of the appointment and have the child's clinic card. As you'd have heard from the Minister of Health recently, the need for appointments is no longer required, and we will work along with parents, however, to schedule the presentation of the students at the various health centers so that we can capture the necessary information. Secondly, a form was created to capture the students' information and issued to schools for dissemination to parents. 3, an appointment schedule was created and each school was assigned an appointment day and date. The following medical facilities were identified: the Bastia Health Center, the Newtown Health Center, the Keon Health Center, Sadler's Health Center, Pogson Medical Facility, and Old Road Health Center. Only one primary public school has identified one 12-year-old, as most students will turn 12 years old in the next calendar year. Only Washington Archibald High School has inputted students into the Google Sheet, but principals were reminded. Since the appointment dates have passed, new dates will be identified and the school will be reissued the updated schedule. Principals were asked to identify PTA dates and enter the information on a Google Sheet. The Google Sheet also included the principal's contact information. To date, 6 of our 17 public primary schools and 3 of our 6 public high schools and 1 of our 6 private schools have set dates. The Google Sheets containing the students' appointment dates and schools' PTA dates were shared with Dr. Marissa Carty at the Ministry of Health to ensure that the information is readily available. Situation report for school meals facility. Operations at the school meals kitchen was also impacted by the presence of the coronavirus. This forced the operation of the school meal plant to be closed for 2 days. The Ministry of Education would like to express thanks to the American Bakery for providing lunch to 1,800 of our most vulnerable students on both days. Operation at the school meals has resumed with staff that have been tested negative and are fully vaccinated. The Ministry of Education continues its appeal to ask all parents, teachers, and students 12 years and above to be vaccinated in order to reduce the amount of disruption in students' learning. I must also indicate that the school meals facility has been completely sanitized since the outbreak. Mr. Speaker, this is the state of our school sector at this point in time in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Education, with the support of the Ministry of Health and the entire government, continues to do all in its power to ensure that we provide a safe and healthy environment for both students and teachers and other staff to operate. At the end of the day, nothing can substitute the need for face-to-face instruction amongst our students, and we strive to maintain this as much as possible. I continue to advocate and to urge all of our teachers and school staff to become vaccinated, and to parents to ensure that their children who are 12 years and up use the opportunity to be vaccinated by the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. With this, Mr. Speaker, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable John L. Powell, Member for St. Christopher 2. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8, Eugene Hamilton.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with your permission to make 2 statements, hopefully brief statements. And as I rise, Mr. Speaker, I want to focus on 2 areas of my ministries, on the social services side and certainly on the human settlement, ecclesiastic side. And Mr. Speaker, as I rise, I'm humbled. In fact, as I rise and recognize what I am about to present to the public so that people can understand and appreciate how to access services, what work we do, I must go back to a favorite passage of scripture of mine. It is a very favorite passage of scripture of mine. I repeat it again. It is 1 John 3, verse 17. And I will add verse 18. I go back there, Mr. Speaker, because I see it as an immense privilege for me to have been given these very ministries, all of them, which, because of the objective and the way the things we do, impact upon the lives of ordinary people, poor people, aged people. And this is an important, and this is why I go to the scripture, because it says, whosoever hath the world's goods and sees his brother in need and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? And in verse 18 it goes on to say, my little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I feel so privileged as the Minister of Social Services, as the Minister of Human Settlement, Ecclesiastical Affairs, Social Security, because all of them, in the objective, feed into exactly what the scripture is trying to tell us, which is, you must do good to those who are less fortunate than yourself. Always do things so that others may benefit who really are in need. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I turn to what's happening with the Ministry of Social Services, because this year the department had to relocate some of its offices. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, a department of the office, the main office, is located at the Antioch Baptist Church new building in Lime Clean. I am saying it and I'm going to repeat it because people must know where to access those who can be of service to them when they need. There is a department, the main office, which has been relocated to the second floor of the Antioch Baptist Church, the new building in Lime Clean. People say Lime Keel. I suppose that is the correct pronunciation. And that is in the lovely constituency of my colleague from constituency number 3, the Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet. That is going down the road just next to the NEMA Center. It is so conspicuous we can't miss it. Up the village. We call it up the village too, right? Yes. And that is one place you can find an office. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that the services of the ministry are decentralized across the country as well. In 6 community centers, you can find service from the Ministry of Social Services in the Newtown Community Center, at the McKnight Community Center, at the Old Road Community Center, at the St. Paul's Community Center, and the Keon Community Center. I'm outlining them because persons in those areas don't need to rush to Basque in the first instance. You can go to those community centers in your area as a first instance and get general direction of what to do, how to do what, to be able to access services from the ministry. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we were able, and we are proud of in 2021, is what we did for the centenarians. Centenarians Day, May 31st, we distributed 5 longevity medals to those centenarians. In fact, Mr. Speaker, one of the centenarians who was 101 at the time, he has now passed, just before making 102, Mr. Vernon Connor. But since he has passed, we still have 6 centenarians who are in St. Kitts and Nevis. And 2 of our centenarians are in, 2 additional centenarians are in the USA as well. But in our federation, we have a unit deport, 105, halfway tree. She's currently in the Cardin home. George Ebenezer David, 100 in St. Peter's. I was pleased to attend his 100th celebration just a few weeks ago. Seemed to run in the family. He had a sister who lived to 101, and even when she was 101, she was still carrying baskets on her head to the market to sell food. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there is a Ruby Thomas, 101 in Newtown. Those 3 are St. Kitts. My colleague over in constituency number 1, I'm sure is familiar with.
There'll be 101 next year.
101.
20th of October.
The honourable member for number 1 seemed to know his constituents. 101, 102. Mary Brown in Nevis, 104. Eliza Jeffers in Nevis, 101. Nathan Sutton in Nevis, 100. And I mention those because in the context of what I started out with, we have been doing things to assist those who are aged in our federation, and the ministry goes out of its way to ensure that they get the benefits of the work done by the ministry. Each year, the department joins around the world with nations around the world in celebrating what we call International Day of Older Persons. It is celebrated on the 1st of October each year, which means tomorrow is a celebration, have it right? Yes, of the International Day of Older Persons. And tomorrow, there will be a Thanksgiving service at 9:30 a.m. at the Rivers of Living Water Christian Center. I believe it is not well known by some persons, so I will repeat it. Tomorrow, in celebration of the International Day of Older Persons, at 9:30 a.m. at the Rivers of Living Water Christian Center, there will be a Thanksgiving service for all of our seniors in Limekill. And yes, my colleague, Limekill. That is down the same road where we talked about the NEMA and the Adjournment Baptist Church, down that same road. Mr. Speaker, we work throughout the year to support our seniors. For example, we were able to get SCELEC, the support of SCELEC on its anniversary, to provide 7 seniors with wheelchairs, for example, beds, cleaning and provision and dumpsters, cleaning supplies. Some of them getting their back doors, which were old, fixed, and their front doors. The exterior house painted. One even has an electric bed. We go out of our way at the ministry to make sure that our seniors are looked after and are comfortable. In order to facilitate our seniors, we do work on our community centers. In fact, Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, we opened a state-of-the-art facility in Lodge, a community center, which is for everyone in the community, of course, but certainly a place where seniors can assemble during the day and benefit from the services that we provide. And we have gone a step further, that every community center, wherever placed in St. Kitts and Nevis, is equipped with Wi-Fi. Everyone who is around a community center would not have to worry. It is open and can access Wi-Fi while you are within the precincts of any community center. This, of course, Mr. Speaker, has been done by cable. The cable and I want to thank them for responding to the call of the government and providing this service. Mr. Speaker, during the year, so much has been said about COVID, the ministry embarked on a program to support the vulnerable. This meaningful intervention was undertaken to meet the need of most vulnerable families, those in quarantine and isolation, and also families impacted by the economically destabilizing forces owing to the increased restrictions caused by this virus. Notably, Mr. Speaker, indebtedness is genuinely expressed to the Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs, and of course, we respond. One of the projects, Mr. Speaker, that we embarked upon, in fact, before I go there, Mr. Speaker, let me point out that because of these efforts, 7,887 persons benefited from the packages of food that were provided and the services of the ministry during that period. 7,887 persons. Number of households that applied, but there were 2,831 households that applied for support. Those in quarantine and isolation, 1,226 persons benefited from that program. Those, of course, unemployed or who had reduced income received, 1,605 of them received packages from the ministry. And so this work has been going on to make sure that our persons do not become, that they remain sustained and move them from a sense of vulnerability. Mr. Speaker, we engaged NEMA. NEMA was instrumental in helping us to deliver these services. NEMA, through their network, found persons in every community, recommended them for support, and we responded. That, of course, Mr. Speaker, is only one of the things that we have been engaged in. And I want to thank the Antioch Baptist Church, Pastor Connor. Commendation is conveyed to the church because they provided extensive food packaging to the ministry. The Rotary Club, we commend them for providing food packages and food supplies. The Office of the Governor General, we commend, providing supplies for food packages, assisted with storage of vulnerable stuff like meat, and of course, he's always keeping in touch with the ministry to ensure that we are supported by his office in what we're doing. The BPW, Business and Professional Women, they also turned in their support. 896 to go. We want to thank them for their input. This entity worked tirelessly with us at no cost during the lockdown to deliver packages to vulnerable households, many of which were affected by economic impact of the pandemic. 869 to go has also extended yet again an olive branch to assist us for the next 6 working days free of cost. They deserve our commendation. Skellect, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, they provided an important set of goods and services. I listed them earlier. Uncle T's, I want to thank Uncle T's, providing food for the officers who worked tirelessly during the expansive food packaging intervention. Credit Union sponsored the Friday Special Seniors Church Service. Mickey's Hope, food packages, as usual. And if you know Mickey, we've heard so much about Mickey. And I don't know if you know Mr. Speaker, but Mickey himself had a heart attack recently, but he's still out there delivering packages despite all of that. A Time for Us Foundation, assisting with food packaging and packaging items. National Caribbean Insurance, providing school supplies. Food Center, also providing food package items. OD Brisbane and Sons, food packet items and food containers. Couriers, providing things like plastic bags. Best Buy, their support has been unmeasurable. Whenever the department needs support during the food packaging initiative and during the lockdown, they were always there. I mention those, Mr. Speaker, because it is not every day that you get an opportunity to say thank you to those people who fall into the category that I read in the first scripture. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and show no compassion. And it's important to mention them. And so, Mr. Speaker, having said that, let me turn to another area of my ministry. And I think it's important to mention this because many people do ask, what is happening with universal health? I want to inform the public that there's a committee in place, a committee comprised of Ms. Gail Cranston, Operations Manager, Shalisa Martin Clark, Permanent Secretary in the Office of Nevis, Ministry of Health, Cremoy Agard, Financial Analyst, Ministry of Finance in St. Kitts, June Brown, Senior Assistant Secretary in the Office of Nevis, Treasury Department, Mr. Levi Bradshaw, Accountant General, Inland Revenue Department, Kiba Tyson, Senior Tax Inspector, Ministry of Justice and Legal Department, Ms. Tashna Powell, Senior Counsel, that might be incorrect, Senior Counsel is not correct, is it? The Counsel in the Office of the Attorney General, Social Security, Mrs. Marilyn Johnson, Chief Financial Officer, and of course from the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Danny Atherton. The committee has been meeting bi-weekly since June to present, with support, of course, from government ministries and other private companies like the insurance companies. And they are putting together a costing schedule. Without going into all of the matters that they discussed, Mr. Speaker, let me just say, one of the tenets of delivering universal health when the time comes is to make sure that we have the correct and the proper legislative framework. And so I want to thank PAHO, whom we have reached out to, and they have now delivered. They have now delivered $45,000 US for the legal consultant, another $5,000 to come in December, and another $10,000 next year, a total of $60,000 US towards providing support for the legal draftsman to do any legal work. That will take a couple of months, and so I want to thank PAHO. The person engaged, who PAHO recommended, was Mr. Anthony Laronde, a legal consultant from Anguilla, signed his contract on 1st September, and I will say is off and running. That is my latest update on the issue of universal health. And finally, Mr. Speaker, while the pandemic has impacted our revenue base negatively, adversely in the last year or two, we have still been able, through housing, to provide support for vulnerable persons as well, the poor. We have only recently, Mr. Speaker, distributed 24 units at Wellington Road. There are some 15 units soon to be distributed in Mansion. There are some 18 units which are close to completion and should be distributed before the end of this year in Stapleton Village. There are 16 units already completed in Conyers. We are just waiting for some works to be done. I'm turning to my colleague, Minister of Public Infrastructure. I don't know if he can move the needle. but there are some things that need to be done, and hopefully we can deliver those 16 before the year is out. So despite the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we have had a very difficult year, a very challenging year, we are continuing to provide do work that provides support to those persons who are vulnerable. And I should add, we have been reaching out to private sector development partners, and one such partner has come on board. And while I cannot give you the exact date, certainly within a month or two, we should see the rollout of a project that will provide support to middle-income families. It's a private project. It's not a government project, but it is provided by government. It is supported by government. And assistance is provided where we can so that that project can come on stream. We are concerned, you see, that many persons in that middle-income bracket, the guy who is back from university may be getting $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, sometimes having difficulty getting financing from a bank because, of course, he's already into a mortgage for his student loan, that can come on board and benefit from that program. In Keyon, they'll be 45. In Tabernacle, I think the number is either 15 or 20. In Sandy Point should be 45. And in camps should be another 45. Those, of course, we expect to be built out over the next 4 years. It will not all happen in 2021 and 2022. It needs time. So those of you who are in the middle income bracket who are interested, the government is working for you. And I look forward to seeing you taking advantage of what we are doing. May it please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Hamilton, Member for St. Christopher 8, and I recognise the Honourable Prime Minister, Member for St. Christopher 7.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise to make a few brief statements, a substantive statement in my capacity as Minister for National Security. But having regard to the statements that have come before mine, I certainly want to commend the Cabinet colleagues who have spoken before, and for giving the country an update of the hard work that has been done behind the scenes to deliver on the stronger and safer future. And I'm certain that every reasonable citizen and resident here could appreciate that St. Kitts and Nevis is a blessed country, and we are fortunate at this time of crisis to have had a team unity government working clearly hard to keep our people safe and to provide for them in the moments of difficulty. I want to commend the Minister of Health, the member for St. Christopher 3, for the update on the ongoing and involving situation with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular, the continuing implementation of our four-pronged strategy to contain, reduce, and eventually defeat the COVID-19 situation in the country. And while in the context of a very evolving and fluid situation, our people always must keep themselves advised and prepared. At my press conference, I made the point which bears repeating. We are in a real war, a deadly war to that extent, where so far millions of persons around the world have lost their life in the battle with COVID-19. And even here, regrettably, we have seen a significant number of persons who would have lost their lives, and we mourn. I reflected on a statement of the Prime Minister of Grenada as he lamented that Grenada, within the last few weeks, have gone from about 0 deaths to 130. And I wondered, as he asked, what do Grenadians think when they see what this virus can do? Why some are so slow in doing the right thing to protect themselves? And the question he posed is one which everywhere we must ask in the context of the global hesitancy in the Caribbean and the hesitancy within the region. Why is it in the face of science? Why is it in the face of data? Some persons are being discouraged by anti-vaxxers, by political wannabes and armchair politicians not to get themselves vaccinated. When some of these persons have secreted themselves into some of these centers, got themselves vaccinated, while they are encouraging others not to do so, to create mayhem in the country. We certainly can defeat COVID-19, and we will use everything in our power to ensure that we do so. The public at large and every member of the community and of the broader society must do the right thing and must take personal responsibility. We are all, the vast majority of the persons over 18 constitute about 70% of the population. So we are talking in the main to adults. How often must they be reminded that the most important tool we have in the fight against the pandemic is the vaccine? Delivered at tremendous negotiation, application of resources, people, and money, and time to get them here ahead of many other countries and make them available free of cost. And also to recruit persons, for example, the Cuban Medical Brigade, to help us in the administering of these vaccines. Made them available in 17 health centers in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Everything made easy for our people, and all that is left is for our people to heed, to get themselves vaccinated, and even while vaccinated, to abide by the protocols. And so we hope that as we move forward to our target of the 80% vaccination, that our people will move fast enough so that we can realize these objectives and we can move on in more fully opening up our country, which so far, and I want to commend all who have gone forward, we have about 75.9% of the population who would have moved forward and have had their first dose. And of all the independent countries within the region, St. Kitts is ahead in terms of its vaccination rollout. But we cannot be complacent in the context of the lived reality here and everywhere. Look how the numbers are moving every day. Look how they are moving, because there is non-compliance. We are not like countries in Africa and Europe and elsewhere who are suffering because there is no vaccines. We have more than enough vaccine to inoculate the entire adult population in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have more than enough. And we have two of the most widely used vaccines around the world here. The Pfizer vaccine, which now allows us, in addition to administering to adults, to be able to do so to our children between 11 and 17. And the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has the widest use around the world in terms of its application within countries, is also available. So I remind all those who would have had their first dose of that vaccine and were waiting for their second, that they can now go to any of our health centers and have their second dose. And those for whom that is their preference, the adult, they can move forward and do so. So again, commendations for what we have been able to do in healthcare, for what we have been able to do in education. Millions of dollars have been spent in getting our schools ready, and we continue to give the fullest support there. We now have an opportunity to halt the closing of our centers of learning from early childhood care delivery right up to college level once our people, the parents, the guardians, the purveyors of education in these centers are vaccinated. Every student in our secondary schools, save largely for medical reason, should move forward and become vaccinated as soon as. That way we can ensure that our schools are safe for everyone. And every teacher must move forward with alacrity to lead by example, and because of their moral obligation to be an example to students, but also to keep the education setting safe. We need and we insist on these things happening the soonest available time. So we are plodding ahead in an organized way, and we are making progress. Although we are ahead of the class, there is still a lot more work which needs to be done. And I join the Minister of Health in commending the private owners of the labs that have been facilitating the COVID-19 tests. They have been with us from the beginning, and I want to commend those who are interested in expansion and to remind them that the government will give them full waiver of taxes and duties and all that is necessary for them to get their labs expanded, or even to bring new labs in operation, so that we can rely within to be able to deliver effective response to the COVID-19. I commend our teachers and administrators. I want to equally join and to commend Mr. Hamilton for his role, and he delivered two important reports. One largely with respect to the subject of social security, and identified three critical areas: the growth in the net asset, for example, and the fact that there being an extension of the time frame within which the reserve could potentially be expired should everything remain the same. That is, none of the recommendations were touched and the predictions remain as they are. I want to commend the Social Services Unit for its work and for the outreach to the very vulnerable persons within our midst. Minister Hamilton gave the quantity of supplies that have been made available. And just Tuesday, after our press conference, Mr. Abdiel Samuel took me on a tour of the warehouse and showed the substantial support that the National Emergency Management Agency has had from well-wishers. The largest contribution has come in terms of a 40-foot container that had been donated by one DevBart and has provided substantial quantity of foods which will be shared according to his plan with our hospitals, with the Harris Home, and such entities, Garden Home, and so on, which is a wonderful thing that we have been able to do this. And I was reminded that all that we have been able to accomplish and the effectiveness with which we have been able to respond, we have been able to do this from local resources in the main. Just yesterday, I had sight of a statement from the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastney, in which he was attempting to explain to his successor in government how he had to get $300 million in loans to be able to respond in 2020. He borrowed $300 million. Other countries borrowed. Today, thank God, this country has not yet borrowed 1 cent to be able to fulfill our mandate to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And we have been able to do this because we had a track record of prudent fiscal management over the last 6 years. And so I want us to count among our blessings these things. And speaking to the blessings, of course, Mr. Speaker, bring me to note that the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, which has been an above average one in terms of activity, is nearing an end. We saw evidence of this being a very busy season, even before the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season, which would normally begin in June 1st, and then in October, November 30th. As has become a pattern now, the first named storm revealed itself in May. This year is the 7th consecutive year in which a storm was formed before the official start of the hurricane season. So what we learned way back in our school days about June being too soon no longer holds in this new era of climate change. This hurricane season was forecast to deliver between 15 to 21 named storms, with between 7 to 10 becoming hurricanes, and 3 to 5 of these were anticipated to become major hurricanes. A major hurricane is so described if it falls in the category of 3 and above, 3 and higher. As of the 30th of September, that is today, there have been 20 recorded named storms, 7 of which developed into hurricanes, with 4 being described as major hurricanes. The Caribbean region has so far been impacted by Hurricane Elsa, Tropical Storm Fred, and Hurricane Grace. We in St. Kitts and Nevis have been fortunate that thus far we have not been impacted by any major tropical cyclone. Indeed, we had at one point had reason to fear the potential impact of Tropical Storm Grace, but this shifted and we were spared by God's mercies and grace. Equally, just recently, we had been monitoring closely the trajectory of Hurricane Sam. And at this point in time, it is no longer a hurricane of interest to us here in St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of its potential to impact us. I want to commend at this point in time, Mr. Speaker, the strong national mechanism that we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis and which continues to monitor any potential impact to the Federation, whether it be tropical, cyclone, or otherwise. And in particular, I have to commend the director of NEMA and the staff at NEMA, Mr. Abdias Samuel, for their continuing commitment to comprehensive disaster management. In a real sense, Mr. Samuel has been an excellent find for that department, and one of the better appointments I commend myself to have made. And so I want to again commend him, and everyone here in the cabinet has come to know him. He's part of the regular appearance at cabinet meetings as receive update on the COVID situation. NEMA has proven that its all hazards approach has been effective and is necessary. It is one of the critical coordinating institutions in our Federation, and it has been part of the effective national COVID-19 response. In the context of NEMA, we want to recognize and commend the work of 10 national disaster subcommittees whose members continue to ensure that our Federation remains prepared and ready to face any potential impact. For the record, the 10 subcommittees are housing and shelter, and for 2021, this committee is being chaired by Valentine Lindsay. Welfare, relief supplies and shelter management is being presided over by Permanent Secretary Janelle Lewis. Foreign assistance, which usually becomes even more pronounced with the coming of hurricanes once the land had make significant impact. This is being presided over by Permanent Secretary Kebas. Search, rescue, and initial clearance is being presided over by Commander Anthony Comrie. Utilities by Darren Lloyd, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. The environmental impact, critically important, with the importance of climate change in particular, and the consequences for that for our continuing habitation of planet Earth. Ms. June Hughes is the person presiding. Issues of transportation, that committee is headed by Carleen Henry Morton. Damage assessment and evaluation is led by George Gilbert at Public Works. Education, communication, and warning issues related to this matter are being handled by our Director General in the Government Information Service, the well-known Lesroy Williams, and the committee with responsibility for medical and public health is being presided over by Dr. Dolores Stapleton Harris. There are two other important personalities who have done so much for our country by their unselfish service, their devotion to duty, that I need to add them. They are my cabinet colleagues, Senator Wendy Phipps and the Attorney General, Mr. Vincent Byron, who are co-chairs of the Mitigation Council. I want to thank them because in large measure it has been, by law, the responsibility of the Prime Minister. Traditionally, this has always been delegated to a cabinet minister, and I've found in these two excellent candidates for the choice. Every meeting I have attended, they have been there, working very hard. and giving the support to the technicians and the private sector entities, for example, the Red Cross, the Chamber, and all others, because it is an all of society approach we are taking to this matter of dealing not just with the issues of hurricanes, but COVID-19, any hazard, and in fact, it's part of the new ethos of our governing strategy. And so I want to commend you, Attorney General, and to commend you, Minister Phipps, for your excellent work on this council and in providing the kind of support. Because at times when we put our technicians to work, they need to know that at the highest level of the government, people are observing their hard work, that their work is being appreciated, and to get assurance that they are working consistent with the government policy. Your presence on this particular council has given this kind of support to the committee members, and I want to thank you for being ever present at all of their meetings, virtually or otherwise. I also want to thank those at the Met Office who have been doing an excellent job. Mr. Burke is one of the senior personalities there, and he is regular in communicating with NEMA and with the Mitigation Council regarding what is happening and any potential threat from tropical cyclones. He's on the ball with the communication. So I want to thank them and to ask that our citizens and residents to commend them too for their work they have been doing in really keeping our federation safe and secure, and to ask and remind that we are not yet at the end of the hurricane season, so continue to pay attention. Indeed, in the context of the volatility of the issues in relation to climate changes, we do not know that the long-standing end of November can be held with any degree as being cast in stone. So long after the season has been officially ended, we can still experience significant tropical storms of concern. So again, be cautious, and we give God thanks really, because we have been able to go through what has been one of the most busy, active hurricane season, and so far we have been spared by God's mercy and grace. So again, I commend the work of NEMA and all the associated institutions helping us in the management of disaster. And I join Minister Hamilton before me in commending the wide cross-section of persons who have been given support, generous support in many cases, to the efforts of NEMA and to the work of the National Task Force on COVID-19. May it please you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 7, Prime Minister Harris. Next item, please.
Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business of the National Assembly and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills and first reading.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise on this occasion to introduce and to have read for the first time a bill entitled Drugs Prevention and Abatement of the Misuse and Abuse of Drugs Amendment Act 2021.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
The question is that the bill entitled the Drugs Prevention and abatement of misuse and abuse of drugs, Amendment Act 2021, be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. No, yes, rise and read the bill. Yes, yeah.
A bill to amend the Drugs Prevention and Abatement of the Misuse and Abuse of Drugs Act, Cap 9.08, otherwise known as the Drug Prevention and Abatement of the Misuse and Abuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise again, and on this occasion it is to present the bill shortly entitled Securities Bill 2021 for its first reading.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill entitled the Securities Bill 2021 be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to provide for the protection of investors in securities in and from within the currency union by regulating the securities market, exchanges, and persons engaged in securities business, by regulating the public issue of securities to reduce systemic risk and to provide for related matters, otherwise known as the Securities Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I rise, with your permission, to have read a first time the bill shortly entitled Civil Aviation Amendment Number 2, Bill 2021.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill entitled the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill Number 2, Bill 2021, be read the first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Civil Aviation Act, Cap 8.03, otherwise known as the Civil Aviation Amendment Number 2 Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise and crave your indulgence to have read for the first time a bill to amend the Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Cap 15.06, that is the Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2021.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2021 be read a first time. Those in favor?
Aye.
No. Please read the bill. Sorry.
A bill to amend the Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Cap 15.06, otherwise known as the Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a first time. Next item on the order paper, please.
Motions, resolutions, adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I rise, seek leave to move the motion for adjournment sine die.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a brief comment on the adjournment. I want to lend support to national efforts and efforts of community groups and charitable organizations who have been doing some very commendable work. But before, I must start with acknowledging that in Constituency 6 in particular, we have been experiencing some deaths, and it has been very challenging for the constituency. Death is always difficult, and I want to extend condolences to the families from Newton Ground, St. Paul's, Deep Bay, Parsons, and Sadlers who have all lost loved ones. It's very important to support as a community in times like these, especially during this pandemic, to lend our support to all the national efforts to ensure that we remain safe and that we can continue life. Mr. Speaker, it's important also that I mention that October, tomorrow we start October, and October is a very special month for advocacy. In particular, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There's also Domestic Violence Awareness, and most importantly, well, for an environmental activist, we are headed to COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. So on these, I just want to lend support and extend some congratulations in particular to Vikel Edwards Douglas, a youth parliamentarian who is headed to the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. He's a young person, a youth parliamentarian, and I think it speaks volumes that we have young persons who are advocates, who are climate advocates, and who are headed to such important global stages to present on behalf of Caribbean countries who are aiming for 1.5 to stay alive. Congratulations are also in order for SCANIPA, who is celebrating 20 years in existence. SCANIPA has been one organization that has experienced what you call quote-unquote brain drain every year. Youth parliamentarians, or SCANIParians as we affectionately call them, leave to go and study, but the organization has maintained its relevance and its commitment to youth activism, and youth parliamentary processes. So I want to extend congratulations to SCANIPA. And in terms of students heading off to study, it's also important that I mention and congratulate the new cohort of students heading off to ROC, the Republic of China and Taiwan, to study for 5 years. It speaks volumes that we still, even in this global pandemic, can ensure that these efforts happen and that these students can spend 5 years enriching their lives and studying to come back to contribute to national development. In terms of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I think I want to extend what I said, full support to all the charities and organizations which will be advocating on behalf of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I know that sometimes, well, at least now during a pandemic, charitable donations have been declining because persons have to weigh making donations as opposed to protecting their families. So I look forward to efforts by all stakeholders, including government, to continue the support of these charitable organizations. In terms of domestic violence and domestic violence awareness, in particular issues that affect women, such as sexual harassment, being safe in the workplace, I want to say that sometimes we may think that global movements do not matter in St. Kitts because we are small or because we feel we're insulated from such situations, but I want to support all women who raise their hands and say, me too. And I want to support all communities and organizations who say, we will support you whenever a woman speaks out about intimate partner violence, domestic violence, or sexual harassment issues. So we're not too small to be part of any global movement. I want to end here by saying, congratulations, thank you to what I think is a very serious and Herculean effort of educators to ensure that we move forward with keeping our students in school. It's extremely difficult. We have students who are starting school in 2021 who will be in school until 2035 if they go through a full slate of education. And the onus is on us as legislators and parliamentarians and leaders and policymakers to ensure that sustainable education and digital education is part of their reality, to ensure that they do not have to worry about their future. And so a big kudos to all the educators who have been able to work along with the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, to ensure that although this is an extremely challenging time for us here as educators, that we can find some pathway to success. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Opposite. Dr. Joel Clark. I recognize Senator Bernice Nisbet.
Mr. Speaker, I rise firstly to express my sympathies to the deceased who recently lost, to the family of the deceased who recently lost their lives as a result of the COVID-19. As a medical doctor, I am beseeching actually, persons to go out and be vaccinated. I wouldn't stand here today and encourage you to be vaccinated if it was not safe or if it was not effective. I myself have been vaccinated. I am still alive. I have no side effects. I also want to express my sympathies to the family members of the following deceased in the constituency number 6, also the district that I work in. Firstly, to the Francis family and by large, the community of St. Paul's, for the loss of Miss Elizabeth or Bet Francis, who passed away on the 1st of September. Miss Francis was a patient of mine who would always share some encouraging words, either from the Bible or from her own experience with me whenever I visited her at home as part of my DMO clinic. She would be greatly missed by all. Secondly, to the family and friends of Lillian Francis John, who is also the niece of the late Elizabeth Francis, who is actually burying today. I send my deepest condolences. Similarly, I wish to express my sympathies to Gladys Liddy, her children, the Liddy and Cranston family, and the entire community of St. Paul's for the passing of Matilda, better known as Catherine Francis of St. Paul's. Miss Liddy, I also had the opportunity to attend and provide medical services during my DMO clinic. She was a kind and gentle soul, and I will dearly miss her. I also want to express sympathies to Tracy Handley, by large, her extended family, the Molly and Walters family, and the entire Sadler's community, and the loss of a great villager. We all are mourning her loss, and today she will be also burying. May her soul rest in peace. As of late, we had a passing of 3 persons from Newtonbourne and Deerby. Eric Stokes Connor, he passed away Monday, the 27th of September. So to his daughter, Mistress Kenya Francis, the children, and the Connor family of the St. Paul's community, I wish to express my condolences. To Mr. Warrington Mills, who left his wife Jarvis Ansel to mourn of Newton Ground. He passed away on Tuesday, the 28th of September. I also want to express my condolences to Peter Liebert family. Well, actually, Peter grew up most of his lives in the UK, but he owned a shop in Dieppe, where he provided service to the Dieppe community for over a decade. So to his family abroad and here, I wish to extend my deepest sympathies. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I shall sit.
Thank you, Senator Nisbet. Honourable Member for St. Christopher 1, Dr. Hanley, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. On adjournment, like you and my colleague, I too want to use this opportunity to congratulate the Sniper Group as we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. I say we, Mr. Speaker, because never in my wildest thought I would have, when you look back over those 20 years, never thought it would have had that impact that the group is having after sowing what I refer to as a simple seed. I feel proud as the founder of that organization that for the past 20 years we have been doing an excellent job dealing with our young people in terms of their holistic development, getting the opportunity to debate, and also being able to guide policies even at that young age, Mr. Speaker. So I want to congratulate Patrice Harris and the entire executive and even the persons chairing the anniversary activities, a job well done. While I'm congratulating as well, Mr. Speaker, I am one who believes in education and always use any opportunity to encourage or push persons to develop to their fullest potential. And I want to congratulate those persons who got the opportunity to study, and I hope I don't get in any trouble by signaling out one of my very own, as I would say, the daughter. Haven't had the opportunity of having her mother being a part of a youth organization that I founded in the constituency, and the daughter and the other siblings also joined that same group. Miss Lisano, she's going off to study in Taiwan, and I'm extremely proud as well for her and the others, but particularly because she always had this fight in her to excel, and I'm happy for the opportunity that she has received, and I wish her all the very best as she go to study, and of course urge her and the others to remain focused and make their country and their families proud. And by extension, I think it is right for me to congratulate the mother, Miss Diane Green, for the job that she would have done over the years in raising her children. She must be proud as well. On a sad note, Mr. Speaker, I too extend sympathies to all of the families of those in the constituency who would have passed, and I at this time extend sympathies to Mrs. Westcott on the passing of her husband who was buried a few days ago, and the Richin family as well, as they are dealing with the loss of their loved one who was recently murdered. As the parliamentary representative for the area, it is a very difficult time when you have to rock your mind to find out exactly what's going on in the minds of our young people. But my task is to encourage all of them to really fight for true peace, and let us find other ways of settling conflicts rather than the route some choose to take. On a better note, Mr. Speaker, I use this opportunity to congratulate all of those new homeowners from East Bastia for the apartments on Wellington Road. After almost about 2 years of waiting, 24 persons were able to receive keys to their apartments. I use this opportunity to encourage them to take care of the property, and at the same time making a plea that their monthly payment must be a priority. I wouldn't want from my constituency lists starting to circulate of persons not living up to their commitments. I'm encouraging them to make sure that they pay their monthly commitment. Of course, Mr. Speaker, it would be nice if eventually they'll be able to own them as their own, but we will wait to see what happens from today. Mr. Speaker, the time has come, what I would say, for us to end the petty politics. I think persons are not accepting it, and I say this because it was brought to my attention by a popular radio personality, even, and I'm speaking in reference to the apartments on Wellington Road, where there might have been this, what should I say, announcement on the radio based on what he might have been saying, that as a parliamentary rep, he feels that I should have been given an invitation to attend the official handing over ceremony. I said the time has come, Mr. Speaker, for us to get past that petty politics. We are, not because you are not a supporter or not on the government side, it means that when things are happening in your constituency, you are not, whether invited or even a little discussion. But those of you who know me would know that those things don't really bother me, because my job is to serve, and I will continue to serve. But Mr. Speaker, as we continue to move forward, because it's a new breed of young politicians, personally I would want to see that kind of behavior discontinued, because it would not, and it doesn't do any good for our community. Matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I would want to live to see, I mean, I won't be in a position all the time, because you know what would happen, but I would want it to be, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to end now, that we reach to the place where even when you are in opposition, because government will end up in opposition one day, that even a budget is set aside for the parliamentarian, so that little projects he or she might be able to get done in their constituency, even though they are not in government, Mr. Speaker. But I say it is something that I know I would be fighting for, because when my time comes for me to be on the other side, I will ensure that the opposition is fully functional. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, with those few words.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 1, Dr. Hanley. I recognize Honourable Member for St. Christopher 6, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with those who have preceded me in terms of expressing sympathies to those of our nationals who have lost their loved ones over the last few months, weeks, and days. In particular, those who have lost loved ones as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Every day in recent times, we have noticed that the numbers of persons who are being tested and who are being tested positively is one of the concerns that I have. And so the deaths are rising almost daily or every 2 days. The number of deaths are increasing. And this is of grave concern, I believe, to all of us here in this chamber, as well as all of us in this country. The challenges that our people are facing daily as a result of the experience of COVID-19, that challenge increases daily. The numbers that are unemployed are continuing to rise as well. The expectations that people would have had earlier, that once the vaccination would have come, and we've had a population now that is well over 80% vaccinated, I'm told, those numbers are still not increasing in terms of employment opportunities. We've had the cruise vessels coming back, although they come back in a bubble, we still do not have the numbers increasing. And so today, on the adjournment, despite the presentations that have been made by ministers under the appropriate item of the agenda, we still continue, it would appear, not to have brought the pandemic under control here in St. Kitts and Nevis. The number of schools that have been closed and children have to revert to virtual learning, that continues to increase. I challenge, therefore, not only the minister, but also the ministry and all of us, parents, all of us, to do whatever we can to ensure that the continuation of our children's education is not interrupted further. Finally, I say, Mr. Speaker, that there have been some statements made pertaining to myself and my two other colleagues former. I will respond to those appropriately at the right time. Finally, to those who in St. Paul's, Saddlers today, who are experiencing the burials of their loved ones, I convey yet again my condolences of those of us on this side of the chamber, and on behalf of the entire communities, we extend our sympathies to those families that are being bereaved. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 6, Dr. Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, I rise. When I moved the adjournment earlier, I did not make any statements, so with your permission, I too want to identify with the families of those who have been suffering as a result of losses, deaths in the family as a result of COVID, or just ordinarily. Since we last met in this Parliament, we've had some losses, and while I do not intend to identify all of them, I want in particular to speak to two in my constituency, and I do so because of the history that I have had with those two families. We've had the loss of Ruby Willett, 93 years old, and Ruby Willett has some children who were colleagues of mine who were students with me at school. I recall Arthur Willett, who rose to the rank of, I think, is inspector in the police force, now retired. We played cricket and football together. We rivaled each other for outside right. And so his mother is passed, and so to him and his family, Linda and others, I express my condolences. And I want to specifically also mention Roy Newman. Roy Newman was the son of one of my teachers, Mr. Newman, who was known for his musical fork, the tuning fork. And so Roy and I played cricket together. He was a member of my team in cricket. And quite frankly, I used to tell him he does not even know how good he is, because he could be the opening bowler of the team. He will turn around and bowl spin, and he will bat. I recall one match in St. Paul's, when, Mr. Speaker, we went to St. Paul's. The St. Paul's cricketers used to like to knock the ball over the fence very often. And one time they made like 180, and we decided we were going to defeat them that day. But as the game started, we lost 3 early wickets. And Roy, that same Roy, said, listen, we're going to now draw the game. Because after you lose 3 of your best cricketers, you must draw the game. And Roy batted all afternoon, making nearly about 90. That's why I was saying to him, he did not know how good he was. He passed just recently, was buried on Monday. And so to the family, the Newman family, my condolences. And I trust that God will continue to guide and strengthen you as you go through your period of mourning. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Hamilton. Member for St. Christopher 8.
Mr. Speaker, one moment, I would like to say one thing. I was about to pass it to you, but decided too quickly. That I want also to express condolences, and I know Minister Hamilton will join me in expressing condolences to Esther and Isaac Davis of Keon, students of the Keon High School. Their mother, Mary Esdale, passed. She is the sister of Gloria Esdale, our reigning Calypso monarch, queen, and so I'd want to express condolences to these students who are experiencing very difficult times right now.
Mr. Speaker, I rise, Mr. Speaker, just to the Parliament, the developments in relation to the management of the COVID-19, and in particular, very recently in Trinidad and Tobago, the Speaker did announce that she had, as it were, to get updates with respect to the vaccination status of members of the Parliament so that she could put the necessary protective measures in terms of seating and otherwise for members who are not vaccinated. And I wondered aloud in the context of the seriousness of the pandemic, and we do not know whether it is something you may want to do some research to look at to ensure that all members of Parliament, to the extent possible, are abiding by the protocols, and that this Parliament itself, being sensitive to the fact that we are in community spread, would look at some model. I know significant expenditures have been borne by the government to, for example, reorganize the setting, physical space here at Parliament. We have seen we took up some of what previously was the gallery to ensure, again, that we comply as far as possible with the issues of physical and social distance. But in the context of that development in another Commonwealth country, and in the context of what we know is in the domain that even within Parliament you have anti-vaxxers, I wonder of what the new president established in Trinidad and Tobago might be useful for a joint committee across the divide of the Parliament to look at as we attempt to model sustainable ways for parliamentary engagement. I just want, in the context of the discussion, to alert you, and you're perhaps aware, that the Trinidad Parliament has taken this COVID-19 compliance very seriously and has moved the Parliament to ask members to state to the Speaker their own vaccination status, so that the Parliament have a full sense of what it is and the commitment of its membership to lead by example. So I just raised that in passing as a matter that I think perhaps will be best served by a committee, however designed by you, but I leave it in your good hands, having raised that particular matter. And to say, by and large, Mr. Speaker, in closing on that note, by and large, the pace at which the country moves to full opening, to getting more people back on the job, is through vaccination. Through vaccination. And the member opposite raised the issue of our successful rollout today. We are saying that while we are happy by that, there's still a long journey. And he would be aware, as a medical practitioner of distant years, Mr. Speaker, distant years, that this is a fluid situation. And the quote-unquote concept of herd immunity is also an evolving one in the context of the number of variants around the world that have emerged and what they have done for the transmissibility impact of the virus and what we now need to do. It is that development in large measure that is at play in the most resourceful country on earth, the United States of America, leading to some of the largest number of cases over the last 6 or so weeks. and which have led President Biden to make an about turn in relation to the issue of mandatory vaccination, and to say, Mr. Speaker, and to say that the population in the USA basically have to get vaccinated in order to participate in certain activities. So when you look at what is happening, you can't look at it in isolation, and you can't look at it absence the knowledge which one ought to have about what is happening. And what has been the result here? High vaccination rates have allowed us, Mr. Speaker, at this particular moment in time, and we start from the premise of a life-saving strategy. One death is one too many. So if we have 10, 13, too many, we accept that. But persons also, and a number of these cases are so defined as COVID deaths, but they are persons with comorbidities. He knows that. We all know that. But once you passed away, the physician, as I understand it, and the member for number 6 had practiced many years back, he would also understand. But we have Dr. Bernice Nisbet here. And she understands because she is in active practice in number 6 and in number 5. But the point is, every probable cause of death is listed on the death certificate. So, if cancer is a contributing factor, it is. COVID-19, it's on the paper. You just that in the context of reporting, one room larger. But all of these are causal factors. In the context of what is happening, we are duty-bound to call them COVID-related death. Because COVID could have exacerbated their situation, their chronic diseases. That is why it is said, those with chronic diseases should get advice and be among the first to go get their vaccine to protect themselves. And that is a message that each of us as each of us as MPs should be saying. But how could we properly have the moral authority to talk about vaccination when we ourselves are unvaccinated up to today, Mr. Speaker? That person then can't be a credible messenger in terms of the vaccination rollout. Can't. Because you can't lead by example. You are not showing what people should do. You're talking it, and they see through the empty words that are being put forward. As we are able to do more and to enhance the safety, because you see the challenges, you only take one. It only takes one member of the parliament who is not vaccinated to infect all of us. Okay? It only takes one. It only takes one person with the virus in a bar to spread it around the country, Mr. Speaker. So that is the point, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members.
The second other point, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members.
Mr. Speaker, could I be protected? Mr. Speaker, I know the truth. Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members,
Mr. Speaker.
I will not tolerate this level of debate at this time of the sitting. We are at the point of adjournment. The difficulty I have had is a very simple one. I know how it started. I know why we have gotten to this point at this late hour. We are experienced parliamentarians. We know what is allowed from what is not allowed. And so to the member for number 6, once you raised questions during the adjournment, which are clearly controversial, which can lead to a debate, we will end up at this point. It is as simple as that. You are the one, or you are the one who is the cause of this.
What did I say? What did I say?
We all know what was said. Honourable member for number 7, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you're a wise speaker, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend you.
Let us move on.
Because you see, Mr. Speaker, I must make this point. At one point when the experienced member for number 6 began to proceed, I pressed my button. Members would observe. I was going to raise a point of order and to say to you, if we are going to have a substantive matter being addressed on the adjournment by the member opposite, it couldn't be done that way. He could bring a motion and we debate it. So you're very right. The final point I wish to make, Mr. Speaker, is that as we open up, as more and more people are vaccinated, we can begin to relax in a number of areas. We have almost worked to a relatively good feat. The Back to Work program in relation to our manufacturing sector, I want to commend our task force. Since 2020, when we were under pressure, if you will, to assist United States government in opening up our plants, how important we are as a small island. It was to us that the Situation Room in the White House looked, to invite the workers at API Harrow Server to go back to work so that they could get the parts needed for the ventilators that they were short of. And we worked almost to a science. Minister of Health Wendy Phipps was part of that. AG was part of that. And the task force. The protocols to get people back in the factories. At that point, all factories were closed. Today, 1,200 plus employees back to work in the manufacturing sector. Today, as we speak, a number of them, these factories have increased their work undertaking. When we look at 2020, Jaro, for example, is up. And several other of the entities are up to where they were at this point last year. So when we hear, well, the employment is up, no, not so. Because as the country has been opening up, more people have been allowed back to work. I did my quarantine at Park Hyatt, and when I asked the manager, Mark, I think is his name, how many persons, he told me he had about 180 people directly employed in his hotel in September. At this time last year, almost all the hotels out of business, maybe save for Four Seasons Hotel. So we are seeing a gradual but marked improvement in the employment situation in the country at this particular moment in time. Even as we look at some of the applications by those who are unemployed, we have had to qualify some of them for a month or two, because when you backtrack the social security record, they're already on the job. So the period for which they had applied, they did not strictly satisfy it, in that when we announced the second stimulus, they basically were already back at work. And so one or two, well, a number of them got you with the first round. We are not a harsh government to go and say, give me back the money that you would have gotten. But we said, you got it for the first month. We have it for you, put it to good use. You will not get for September and October, because strictly speaking, you did not qualify. So the situation with regard to employment is one of general improvement, and it must be so. The construction work continues, Mr. Speaker, so more persons are at work. We have said repeatedly that, for example, in terms of the Marine Department, their report here, month after month, as we updated them, showed we had over 1,200 fishers at work, a number of them from Lake Bay, a number of them from St. Paul's, registered and actively participating, because that sector has been opened up. And you take it sector by sector, the numbers are improving when you look at the comparative situation last year as it is this year. More people are getting longer hours of work. I mean, last year, this time, we were still, even for the government, working in a reduced manpower. Now more persons are fully engaged. We look at the security sector. Again, on account of the COVID-19 pandemic, a significant number of persons have gotten jobs. Some of them part-time, some of them second jobs in that sector, because security has now become more pronounced in the context of COVID-19. And even when we started easing in that, well, before that, you were required to have security if you were going to do home quarantine. We said that if you're fully vaccinated, you can go, and we will no longer burden you with the issue of the private security. So the country's trajectory has been good, not the very best. The Minister for Social Security reported that the highest number of persons ever employed in the history of Social Security, which has been going since 1978, is under the Steam Unity government. This is not just me saying that. That is the data passed by the actuary saying that nearly 30,000 people at work under Team Unity government in 2019, thereabout. I think that is the last year. And our job in successfully managing this is to get back everyone to work, reach the target, and surpass it in the next couple of years. More persons in tourism can expect to get there. Last year, this year, there was no cruise ship. This year, we are having. So more persons then are participating. Not all, and we would love all. But danger lurks. And so we have to go apace, in step. So you're not going to see this high movement in terms of opening up tourism. We have applied again the science to do bubble tours. The first ship that came went over to Carambola, that area there. We determined that those that will come after will go down at Port Zante, so that business down there will get an opportunity to open their doors. And when their doors are open, and employment will be there. And we have said that we want the widest majority of persons to benefit from the coming back of the cruise tourism to St. Kitts and Nevis after basically everything closed by the CDC in the United States of America. So that is where we are. So things will only get better. Things will get better in terms of employment as more persons get themselves vaccinated so that they can participate in the forward march to the stronger and safer future. I was inclined, Mr. Speaker, to make those points of correction having regard to the late input of the member opposite, filled with inaccuracies in material particulars. May it please you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to be able to make these passing observations on the adjournment.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 7. Before I announce the adjournment, I would just wish to make the simple point that from where I sit, I believe the asking of a simple question during an adjournment can lead to a debate. Because if a question is asked while a member is on his or her feet during an adjournment, and that question is left unanswered, it in itself could be viewed by the general public as, well, maybe someone does not have an answer to that question, maybe it's true. And so what we experienced over the last few minutes, I believe, is a classic example of how we can end up at this point on the conclusion of a sitting. So my simple advice to honorable members is that on the adjournment, I would suggest that we try our best to stay away from anything that's controversial, because as the presiding officer, I will have to make a decision to allow a response or to allow debate, discussion on the adjournment in my attempt to be fair. Some may question, well, the length of a response. I state that I do not have the authority under our standing orders to limit a presentation by any member, except in cases where it is specified in the standing orders. As we function now, our standing orders speak to only particular areas and specify time limits. So I cannot interrupt, or I would not interrupt, I would not try to restrict a member from speaking for whatever length of time he or she chooses to speak if I feel I am not empowered to curtail the presentation. It is as simple as that. And so, having said all that, there is a committee in place which is reviewing the standing orders, and all of these gray areas, if I may refer to them as that, I believe would be closely looked at, and this House, as a matter of fact, in the end would make recommendations or approve recommendations and a new set of standing orders. So I just wanted to make those few comments as we close. In closing, I would like to place on record congratulations to a youngster. I have learned of a youngster in the person of Muriel Knight, who would have been elected president of the St. Kitts Youth Parliamentary Association. I congratulate him. I understand he's just 18 years old. He would have traveled with a delegation which I headed to Trinidad maybe 3 years ago, and so I was quite pleased to hear of that elevation of the youngster, now elected president of the St. Kitts Youth Parliamentary Association. And earlier when I mentioned congratulated the Parliamentary Association, it was remiss of me not to single out one of our members here, Dr. Jeffrey Hanley. It slipped me, sir, that you were in fact a founder of that association. So congratulations are in order to you too, sir. Honourable members, the question is that this House stands adjourned, sine die. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.